Greetings. Do without wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Magick Without Tears video. So, as the last video was on letter D, and I've already gone over letter E and the first paragraph or two of letter F in my magical mottos video, link in the description, we're going to be skipping letter E because we've covered that. And we're diving straight into the rest of letter F, which is rather lengthy, so let's begin. Alright, so letter F picks up about Qabalah after the portion about mottos. Now, on this channel, I've not gone over too much Qabalah, though I have used Hermetic Qabalah in almost every video on this channel for analysis. So let's do a crash course. The Tree of Life has 10 spheres and 22 paths that connect the 10 spheres. The spheres, called Sephiroth. Sephiroth means count. Count of 1 to 2, 3 to 10, right? The spheres represent the emanations of God as the divine light, and this light's descent from spirit into matter. The first 11 numbers, 0 through 10, are used as the penultimate symbols of this process. You could see my color, shapes, and numbers video for an explanation on the first 10, 11 numbers. Link in the description below. As said, the 22 paths, which connect the 10 spheres, are also emanations of this divine light, but are symbolized first and foremost not by numbers, but by the 22 Hebrew letters. Every letter in Hebrew, just like Greek, also has a value, which yields a gematria value for words when you add up the values of those letters. And every letter also has a name, which must be thought out on a symbolic basis through meditation. The first Hebrew letter is the letter A. It's Aleph, meaning ox. The second letter B is Beth, meaning house, and so on, through all 22 letters. It is up to each and every practitioner to work out why the name of that letter corresponds with the nature of that letter. Then there are the magician's tables. All 32 paths, the 10 spheres and their connecting lines, have many columns of correspondences in the magician's tables. And these tables, these columns in the magician's tables, further describe the symbolic nature of that line in that column. So you'll have symbols ranging from angels, pantheons, low spirits, animals, plants. Anything physical, mental, or spiritual can be placed in a column on the Tree of Life and be broken down into the symbolic nature of either the numbers 0 through 10 or the letters A through T in Hebrew. Most important for the letters, and even the Sephiroth, are the astrological correspondences. So Kether, the first sphere, the number 1, is the divine light. It's the origin from nothingness into light. It's number 1. It's a unity. For example, Gabora, the 5th sphere, is Mars. Mars is a very warlike masculine energy. Yet it's found on a feminine pillar. There are 3 pillars on the Tree of Life. A feminine, a masculine, and an in-between. The feminine being water, the masculine being fire, and the in-between being air. Right? Mars is found on that feminine pillar, so it's kind of like this balancing act. So you'll always find a lot of balance in the Tree of Life. Malkuth, the 10th sphere at the bottom, is the descent from the light into matter. It's the end goal of the light's descent. So Malkuth represents the element earth, as it is the end of the descent of light into matter. The path of Gimel, it's the 3rd Hebrew letter. Gimel means camel, and Gimel corresponds astrologically. Its astrological symbol is the moon. The letter Gimel connects Tifereth, the sphere of the sun, which is directly in the center of the Tree of Life, with Kether. So there's a line connecting Kether to Tifereth in the middle pillar, and that's where you'll find the letter Gimel, which is the moon. And it does this by going straight through the Kabbalistic abyss. So the top 3 spheres are still in a very intense unity, even though they're broken into the first 3. and they're represented by the triangle, which is a very spiritual symbol in symbolic geometry. Being that the letter Gimel corresponds with the moon, does not our moon reflect the light of the sun? So here, Gimel being corresponding with the moon is a play on the reflection of the divine light into our sun, Sol, so that the sun, the brightest thing in our solar system, is used as a symbol of God, as a manifestation of the divine light in Kether. See how you could play around with these symbols? It's very interesting once you start to think about why is this letter and its correspondences connected to these spheres. What is the symbolic representation that is trying to be communicated? Going back to Gimel, Gimel's connection is a straight vertical line, straight through the abyss. And the abyss, which separates the unconscious mind from the conscious mind, it's symbolized as a barren desert. Thus, Gimel, meaning camel, if you translate, or the word Gimel means camel, is the most suitable animal to make that journey. So you could then meditate about the symbolic aspect of a camel crossing the desert and how the descent of the light, the divine light, into the sun's light, or vice versa, a person going through the tree of life starts at the bottom in the physical world and tries to ascend all the way up to that divine light. What about the camel represents that portion of the journey, this disconnect between conscious and unconscious? You're trying to get into that unconscious spiritual mind state, this spiritual realm, right? The supernal realm. What about the camel crossing the desert? And that's whole, if you take that as a symbol, what about that describes that journey from consciousness into unconsciousness, from the mental realm into the spiritual realm? Every path and all of its symbols in the magician's tables must be thought out on similar lines as I've just described, being what they are, why they do what they do in relation to every other path on the tree. Work first on memorizing the Hebrew alphabet and their basic correspondences of value, its name, the name of the letter, the astrological association, whether that's an element, planet, or zodiac sign. Then work on memorizing the rest of Liber 777's tables. Quote from letter F. If, however, you work at the Qabalah in the same way as I did myself, in season and out of season, you ought to get a very fair grasp of it in 6 months. End quote. So if you do that, Crowley then demonstrates how you can use the tables in very unique manners in your day-to-day life as a magician. Quote, I will now tell you what this method is. As I walked about, I made a point of attributing everything I saw to its appropriate idea. I would walk out of the door of my house and reflect that the door is the letter Daleth, and the house, Beth. Now the word Dab, D-B, Daleth, Beth, is Hebrew for bear, and has the number 6. D equals 4 by value, and B is 2, so 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 is the number of the sun, which refers to the sun. Then you come to the fence of your property, and that is Chet, meaning fence, and its value is the 8th letter, so its value is 8. The number of the tarot trumps Atu 7, which is the chariot. So you begin to look about for your car. Then you come to the street, and the first house you see is number 86, and that is the value of Elohim. That's gods in Hebrew. And it is built of red brick, which reminds you of Mars and the blasted tower, and so on. As soon as this sort of work, which can be done in a quite light-hearted spirit, becomes habitual, you will find your mind running naturally in this direction, and will be surprised at your progress. Never let your mind wander from the fact that your Qabalah is not my Qabalah. A good many of the things which I have noted may be useful to you, but you must construct your own system so that it is a living weapon in your hand. I think I am fair if I say that the first step on the Qabalah, which may be called success, is when you make an actual discovery which throws light on some problem which has been troubling you. A quarter of a century ago, I was in New Orleans, and was very puzzled about my immediate course of action. In fact, I may say I was very much distressed. There seemed literally nothing that I could do, so I bethought myself that I had better invoke Mercury. As soon as I got into the appropriate frame of mind, it naturally occurred to me, with a sort of joy, but I am Mercury. I put that phrase into Latin, Mercurius sum, and suddenly something struck me, a sort of nameless reaction which said, that's not quite right. Like a flash, it came to me, to put it into Greek, which gave me oi me. And adding that up rapidly, I got the number 418, with all the marvelous correspondences which had been so abundantly useful to me in the past. See the equinox of the gods. My troubles disappeared like a flash of lightning. End quote. Now, one day I will make full videos about Qabalah. For now, let that suffice. That is a very quick crash course on how powerful the Qabalah could be on a magical path, how you could use it, how you should start memorizing things, how you should use it every single day of your life as a magician. To continue with letter F, quote, now to answer your questions, seriatim. It is quite all right to put questions to me about the book of the law. A very extended commentary has been written, but it is not yet published. I shall probably be able to answer any of your questions from the manuscript, but you cannot go after that when it would become a discussion. As they say in law courts, you must take the witness's answer. End quote. So Crowley is adamant about people not making up ideas about Librel and then telling other people, you have to believe my interpretation, and then starting a fight about your interpretation and arguing and trying to get people convinced that your interpretation is the correct one. In almost every published copy of Librel, you'll see the Tunis comment at the end of chapter 3, which is printed and basically says, quote, one portion of it, quote, all questions of the law are to be decided only by appeal to my writings, each for himself, end quote. What this portion of the Tunis comment is saying is that you should study the book and look for meaning in other works by Aleister Crowley, the Hermetic Qabalah, and books by authors Crowley mandated his students to also study. He has longer comments, the Old and New, which are published as the philosophical commentaries on Librel, and also the I'm going to butcher this, the Digeridennis comment. These three comments all add much depth to one's understanding of Librel, so you should check all the Old, the New, and the Digeridennis comment of Librel. The main point is that every person should do the study and practice for themselves. We do not in Thelema act like the Roman Catholic Church, where some random priest did the work and tells us what to think while we sit there like cattle being led to the slaughter. Do the great work yourself. This YouTube channel, even though I go over, book 4 chapter by chapter, that is not a substitute for reading the book. You need to read the book yourself. It is not a substitute for the things you find in that book that I don't do on this channel, such as maybe a phrase in Hebrew appears, and if you've never heard that word or phrase, do the gematria and meditate on what is that word doing in that passage of that chapter in relation to the chapter. You need to do that work yourself. So nobody could do your great work for you. My study, even though I share a lot of it to help inspire and give some kind of a guidance, or I try to energize people to take up study a little bit more seriously, this channel does not substitute reading these books yourself. Now, Crowley continues letter F, quote, the Qabalah, both Greek and Hebrew, also very likely Arabic, was used by the author of the Book of the Law. I have explained above the proper use of the Qabalah. I cannot tell you how the early Rosicrucians used it, but I think one may assume that their methods were not dissimilar to our own. Incidentally, it is not very safe to talk about Rosicrucians because their name has become a signal for letting loose the most devastating floods of nonsense. What is really known about the original Rosicrucians is practically confined to the 3 documents which they issued. The 18th century Rosicrucians may or may not have been legitimate successors to the original Brotherhood. I don't know. But from the OTO derived its authority. The late OHO, outer head of the order, Theodore Royce, possessed a certain number of documents which demonstrated the validity of his claim according to him, but I only saw 2 or 3 of them, and they were not of very great importance. Unfortunately, he died shortly after the last war, and he had got out of touch with some of the other grandmasters. The documents did not come to me as they should have done. They were seized by his wife, who had an idea that she could sell them for a fantastic price, and we did not feel inclined to meet her views. I don't think the matter is of very great importance. The work being done by members of the order all over the place is to me quite sufficient." End quote. Real quick, the author of the Book of the Law is not Aleister Crowley. It's Aiwass, his holy guardian angel. Crowley is considered the scribe who wrote the words of Aiwass, speaking on behalf of the 3 Thelemic deities. The Rosicrucians, that's a whole other thing. Maybe I'll do a lecture about the Rosicrucians. There's a couple of pretty decent books that break down lineages, and I could even go into like SRIA, Societas Rosicruciae in Anglia, and some of the more legitimate offsprings that have come from Rosicrucianism in present day. There's even Martinism, which descends from Bavarian Illuminatiism. So there's some pretty cool lineages and stuff, but I'm not going to go into a lot of that. But like AMORC, I think it was started by Richard Spence or whoever. Yeah, it's like just made up shit, and people always want to claim, even Samuel Little McGregor Mathers. We don't know who the hell he was really talking to and whether they were actually part of anything. They may have found manuscripts and been part of some theosophical offshoot or whatever and claim that they were a Rosicrucian, and that's how the Golden Dawn was started. It's very sketchy stuff. So it's like everybody today is a Rosicrucian. It's like, well, are you? Like, there's no true lineage that could be 100% verified at this point. Probably the original Rosicrucian order died. There was no more initiations, and then there was such buzz about it, and other forms of occultism being written about, that's started new orders based on what was known in Qabalah study and Egyptian study and Christian Gnosticism study, and kind of just meshed into what we have today. The 3 texts mentioned above that the Rosicrucians gave the world were Fama Fraternitatis, which had 2 books in it, and The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosencreutz. Now, the OTO, which I don't like talking about on this channel, they're not my business anymore, but in regards to this chapter, I will mention the OTO claims to be the heirs to many occult orders. Most of it is merely that they read books and carried on the tradition. There's no proof of legitimate succession to damn near any of the groups they claim to be authority of. So, don't believe what you hear on, if you meet somebody the 8th degree who's a pontiff of the Illuminati. The Illuminati stopped in, the 1780s. It's like, there's no legitimate succession. So that's all I'll say on that matter. Continuing with the letter F, quote, "The Ruach contains both the moral and intellectual worlds, which is really all that we mean by the conscious mind. Perhaps it even includes certain portions of the subconscious," end quote. The Ruach, meaning the intellectual part of the soul, in Qabalah, encompasses 6 spheres on the Tree of Life. These are Yesod, which is right above Malkuth at the bottom, Hod, Netzach, Tifereth, Geburah, and Chesed. It may also touch Doth, but that is not a real sphere, just an illusion, and Doth means knowledge, as knowledge alone is a trap and will not equate to spiritual union or attainment, and knowledge Doth must be transcended. It's like Jnana Yoga, study of Qabalah, is not going to get you there alone. It's an intellectual study. It can help you get to the threshold, but knowledge alone will not get you through the threshold. It can get you to the threshold. And you have to take that leap that is antithetical to knowledge, let's say, or transcends it. So these 6 spheres mentioned, correspond with the planets Luna, Mercury, Venus, Sol, Mars, and Jupiter. If the hexagram is considered a symbol of the Ruach, then Saturn, the uppermost point of the hexagram, can also be part of the Ruach, Thus, it extends up to the abyss and just barely grazes the bottom edge of Bina. But Bina is still part of the supernal realm and is its own part of the soul, Neshama. So to continue, quote, in initiation from the grade of neophyte to that of zealater, one passes by this way. The main work is to obtain admission to and control of the astral plane. Your expressions about purifying the feelings and so on are rather vague to enter into a scientific system like ours. The result which you doubtless refer to is attained automatically in the course of your experiments. You very soon discover the sort of state of mind which is favorable or unfavorable to the work, and you also discover what is helpful and harmful to these states in your way of life. For instance, the practice, like the non-receiving of gifts, is all right for a Hindu whose mind is branded for 10,000 incarnations by the shock of accepting a cigarette or a cup of tea. Incidentally, most of the Eastern cults fall down when they come west, simply because they make no allowance for our different temperaments. Also, they set tasks which are completely unsuitable to Europeans. An immense amount of disappointment has been caused by failure to recognize these facts. End quote. So the astral plane I covered in a video of its own, 2 videos really. The neophyte is tested in powers of the astral, taking a journey through an astral door that has a sigil on it, which their instructor gave them. If they see on the astral vision things aligned with the meaning of that sigil, then they'll pass the examination. There are other practices and exams which they are trained in prior to such examinations. Rising on the planes, seeing things in the physical world that are in another room, communications through long distances, etc. In the above quote, it appears Mackie had some idea about purifying feelings. I don't know what she had written, which is why I wish we had her letters in this book also, but it gave me an idea to mention something. Many people seek the occult because they are hurt and are looking to heal. Many people come with baggage and emotional disorders. It's fine, it's common, and they're seeking a fix. Ultimately, many people who have such problems need fix other areas of their life, deal with suppressed traumas, and learn discipline and dedication. In the course of yoga outlined in AA, for example, many of these maladies are brought to the surface, addressed, and corrected. The few things that yoga cannot fix may need special care, but that's not part of ritual magic or yoga to deal with. That is for the person and probably a professional to address. Sometimes therapy, sometimes medication. Each must determine such things for themselves. The state of mind suitable for the great work is one of inquisitiveness, determination, perseverance, and scrutiny. Treat every experience you have had as something objective to be learned from, and you'll eventually do all right. If you have too much emotional attachment to any one experience, you're looking for a world of hurt. In the above quote on the idea of gift giving, the Lima is its own brand. While AA has mandates such as not receiving money for sharing teachings, most things of a mental and ethical nature should be considered and mandated by the individual alone. If the individual determines something is okay for them to do, they will learn quickly enough whether they were right or wrong, as the universe is going to teach them. When Crowley said at the end of the quote that Eastern traditions fail when practiced by Europeans, my guess is that because Europeans have rituals for worship, alone with some prayer, used mostly as a wishing well, even pagan cults are more about gestures and spoken word than of silent meditation, adaptations need to be made for such people to get better effects from it. Hinduism has many cultural mandates also, such as not eating beef or wearing certain clothes or begging alms, the latter of which is frowned upon by most people in the West, Europe, and Asia. They look on such people as beggars. Of course, unless you own a large, beautiful church and you're not asking for a penny to feed yourself, but hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time, well, capitalism is fine in Europe and especially the USA, while renouncing work to focus on spirituality is not, which is unfortunate. So it's just different cultures that have made these different systems of attainment, and what I like about mysticism via Aleister Crowley's Magic and Mysticism, he makes those adaptations and allows for students to make further adaptations to better fit how they can really benefit from doing such practices. Letter F continues, quote, "You can, if you like, try to work out a progress of Osiris through Amenti on the Tree of Life, but I doubt whether you will get any satisfactory result. It seems to me that you should confine yourself very closely to the actual work in front of you. At the present moment, of course, this includes a good deal of general study, but my point is that the terms employed in that study should always be capable of precise definition. I'm not sure whether you have my little essays toward truth. The first essay in the book, entitled Man, gives a full account of the 5 principles which go to make up man according to the Kabbalistic system. I have tried to define these terms as accurately as possible, and I think you will find them, in any case, clearer than those to which you have become accustomed with in the Eastern systems. In India, by the way, no attempt is ever made to use these vague terms. They always have a very clear idea of what is meant by words like Buddha, manas, and the like. Attempts at translation are very unsatisfactory. I find that even with such a simple matter as the 8 limbs of yoga, you will see when you come to read my 8 lectures." End quote. So again, the way words are used in many of the prescribed books for study in such systems as the AA can be very tricky. Language is a device of Mercury, after all. Crowley uses every word, especially in the holy books, in precise and even unique ways, which should be analyzed under the strictest Kabbalistic pretenses. He mentions that one could theoretically plot out the path of Osiris through the afterlife on the Tree of Life, but that while one could theoretically, it is better for a student to focus on their curriculum rather than perform mental masturbation with no valid reason for doing so. If I personally had $1 for how many times I've seen students do anything and everything except the work they've already been mandated in front of them, I'd be a very rich person. Whether it's coming from lack of understanding, ADHD, or their unconscious mind sabotaging their great work, I don't know. But it happens often that instead of reading that curriculum, they chase books which aren't prescribed at any grade and end up getting mad at their instructor when, after years, they've made little to no progress. Moving on with the above quote, Crowley mentions that the first chapter of Little Essays Towards Truth, titled Man, he outlines and defines the 5 principles which make up each person. Of course, you should read that chapter yourself, in conjunction with Sefer Yetzirah, but I'll give a few notes on these 5 parts of the soul from that chapter. 1. The Yechaida, the self. Similar to the grade title Ipsissimus, it is the divine particle of the human which exists in all things. Little could be said about it because it is above language and labels. 2. The Chaya, meaning life. This is the part of the soul which is consciousness, separates us from rocks, trees, even the beasts in many ways. It's synonymous with the seed of true will, originating in Chachma as the logos of the light. Number 3, Neshama, the intuitive part of the soul, responsible for all psychic faculties. It corresponds with Bina in the unconscious realm. 4, the Ruach, which I mentioned above. It's the intellectual part of the soul. It's synonymous with the conscious mind, and thus all faculties of the mind from emotion to reasoning. The Nefesh, the animal soul. In my opinion, it's similar to, in Jungian psychology, the id. It is the part of the soul which craves food, shelter, procreation, all primal things of body and sensory pleasure. The final part of the above quote mentions that in Buddhist and Hindu spiritual circles, terminology is quite systematic and clear, but once you try to translate any of it into English, it falls apart and muddles one's mind, as we do not possess English terms which are equal to the spiritual science of those systems. Some terms have multiple meanings, like even English words have multiple meanings, and so you have to take all of those things into account. And it's unfortunate when you read certain English translations of books, whether it's coming from Mandarin or Sanskrit or any other language, people choose words that have one similar definition, but that Sanskrit word could have 5 different interpretations, and maybe 3 of those interpretations were implied, and the translator only picked one of those 3 words, which they felt was best, so you end up losing a lot in the translation. That's what Crowley meant by that. And now for the end paragraphs of this letter. Quote, I am very pleased with your illustrations. That is excellent practice for you. Presently you have to make talismans and a lamen for yourself, and even to devise a seal to serve as what you might call a magical coat of arms. And all this sort of thing is very helpful. It occurs to me that so far we have done nothing about the astral plane and this path of Tao which you speak. Have you had any experience of traveling in the astral? If not, do you think that you could begin by yourself on the lines laid down in Liber O, sections 5 and 6? If not, you had better let me take you through the first great gates. The question of noise instantly arises. I think we should have to do it not earlier than 9 o'clock at night, and I don't know whether you can manage this. Love is the law, love under will, free eternally, 666. End quote. Every neophyte of AA must construct a paten with a suitable symbol of their understanding of the universe upon it. As for a lamen, perhaps that was a personal assignment given Mackie by Crowley. But I do recommend every one of you listening, every magician out there should make their own lamen, which is a coat of arms. And I think I have a video on this channel breaking down the difference between sigils, lamens, all of those type of things. Like the 12 tribes with those 12 stones, that could be considered a lamen. Coat of arms depicting what their will is and the magical prowess that they possess. Crowley states that powers of astral travel are associated with the path of Tao. Again, I go over all astralite stuff in the video of that title. Liber O, Valmanus et Sagittae, is undoubtedly the best place to start working on those abilities. At the very end, it seems noise pollution from the street was disturbing Mackie's concentration while doing some practices. This is interesting. When I was new to the occult, I actually began doing meditation under very high stress conditions. Being in an ice cold shower, under the blazing hot sun on the beach, with music blasting on speakers in a club, even in the middle of a rave, so that the chaos of people around me, eventually I was able to drown out and attain astral travel and walk in my astral body around the entire club. I'd gotten to a point that nothing, no matter how intolerable, could disturb me. When I was able to do meditation under high stress, well, when conditions were peaceful, I was able to much more easily get my consciousness altered. I recommend everyone who is new do the same. Also, I've done this under high stress and I've done it under very peaceful conditions. I've done meditations where I have my eyes open and I work towards first turning off my visual sight. Even though my eyes are open, you can't see anything. Then tuning out all the hearing and turning the sense of hearing off. Then working towards turning off physical sensation, smell, taste, leaving just this spiritual core of what you are behind, turning down all 5 senses. And then in that state and afterwards, really considering, what am I without those 5 senses of this body and brain's interpretation? It's a very interesting kind of peeling back the layers of oneself to see what you really are. Well, that does it for letter F. Love is the law, love under will. I'll see y'all in the next one.